Well, good morning, Branches. It's May 17th, 2020. We're still here. We will probably not meet as a class for quite some time. That virus is still out there and people are still dying. And folks our age don't come out too well. Today we're going to study Psalm 101. This is almost like an ethics class when you read this psalm. It's really got some great values in it. It was written by David, and some believe that this was kind of David's wish list for how he would rule once he took over. So it's believed he wrote this right before he ascended the throne. And it's also useful for us as individuals, and this can help us build on our worldview, on what we believe, our values, and how we want to live our life. It's almost like a New Year's resolutions. We make those every year and we break them. I never do lose weight, so that's usually my New Year's resolution. So let's move into Psalm 101, verse 1. I will sing of your love and justice to you, Lord. I will sing praise. I will be careful to lead a blameless life. When will you come to me? I will conduct the affairs of my house with a blameless heart. This word in verse 1, love, that's not the best translation. It's really a more complex word than it's hard to put just one word translation to this word and to get the true meaning of Hebrew. Let's look at what Mr. Vines had to say about it. He said, in general, one may identify three basic meanings of the word, which always interact: strength, steadfastness, and love. Any understanding of the word that fails to suggest all three inevitably loses some of its richness. Love by itself easily becomes sentimentalized or universalized apart from the covenant. Yet strength or steadfastness suggests only the fulfillment of a legal or other obligation. Basically what he's saying is you got to combine love with steadfastness and strength and in order to really see the true meaning of that word. It's always interesting to see how the other translations do. And so I listed the main translations that I like to look at. And it's amazing how different they can be trying to explain some of these words. Some of these Hebrew and Greek words in the Bible are pretty complex and may have lots of meanings. And the translator just has to try and figure out from the context exactly what the meaning is. The NIV translated love. King James said mercy. The ESV, that's probably one of the best translations for this word. He said steadfast love. That goes with what Mr. Vines had to say. The CSB is a pretty good, faithful love. The New American Standard, loving kindness. The Net Bible just translated loyalty. And the Young's literal translation, the YOT, translates the word kindness. So it's really difficult to find a word that expresses the love of God. It has to be higher and more complex than our understanding of love. And so if we put all these together, all these translations, we can say that God's love is steadfast, faithful, loyal, and kind. It would be really difficult to find this type of love from a person. But that is indeed something worth singing about, as David said. He also sang about justice. It's not a surprise that love and justice are two of God's many great attributes which describe his holiness. Even the world may say, well, God is really a loving God, but a loving God would never send somebody to hell. That's what they say, except there's one problem. The holiness of God presents us with a big problem. Because in order to be holy, God must also be just. And to be just, one must punish sin. You notice justice has a blindfold and scales, but also a sword. Mankind's justice is not always perfect, but God's is. We are all sinners, therefore God must punish us as part of his holiness. This is a predicament which we cannot ourselves solve. But because of God's steadfast, faithful, loyal, and kind love, he provided a way for mankind to be declared not guilty, or sometimes we use the word justified. See, his son took the punishment for us, and all we have to do is believe and put our faith in Christ. And we will be saved, and God will not have to punish us. He will instead reward us. He'll make us one of his children. Now that is worth singing about, and we actually do sing a lot about it. In verse 2, David wanted to be blameless. Now this is the same Hebrew word that described Noah. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 9, it says, "This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless." There's that same word. Among the people of his time. And he walked faithfully with God. Now the word ethics, if you look it up in the dictionary, it means something kind of like this, a set of moral principles or moral values. And so it seems like ethical behavior today will actually be criticized. The world will laugh at you if you show ethical behaviors. It's usually not admired, but it should be. Ethics points to morals, and morals point to a moral lawgiver. Many people today reject the idea of a moral lawgiver and believe that morals come from society or from history or from the opinion of others. To believe in a moral lawgiver means believing in God, and the world does not want to do that. If there is no moral lawgiver, then mankind can just make up their own laws, which they do. David knew where his moral laws came from. But what about that question he asked right in the middle of verse 2? I thought that was strange. It almost looked like he was ADD. Just all of a sudden, he asked this question, "When will you come to me?" Well, he may be asking one of two things, or maybe both. Without God being with the king, there will be failures. And David saw that with Saul. See, Saul rejected, God rejected Saul, and things did not go well after that. But there's another meaning that might explain that question. Now, if this psalm was written right as David was about to ascend the throne, as some believe, the Ark of the Covenant was not yet in Jerusalem. It was on its way. It was on a cart. And one fellow got his name in the Bible, but it was not really a very good deal for him. His name was Uzzah, and he saw the Ark of the Covenant looks like it was about to turn over, and he reached up and touched it. And when he did, he died. So the Ark did not come to Jerusalem. It went somewhere else for a while, and they kept it safe, and it blessed them too. But maybe David is thinking, when will you come to me? Maybe he sees the Ark as the presence of God. And so he feels like when that Ark comes to Jerusalem, then God has come there. Now, he also promised to conduct the affairs of his house blamelessly. The word house can have about 5 different meanings in the Hebrew. While it can mean a physical house and all of its interior parts, there is another meaning for this usage. When one refers to their house, for example, the house of David, this often refers to the family members of the household. In this case, David would be living blamelessly in front of his family and would be an example for his family. This fragment that you see on the screen was found in northern Israel. Now, there are many skeptics out there, and some skeptics were saying that there probably wasn't even a person named David, that it was just all a myth. And then archaeology finds this up in northern Israel. Inscribed on here, it says the house of David. And so that's referring to his family and everybody associated with his family. That this exact same word is used on a lot of signs that we have in our houses. A lot of people have this sign, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Well, he's talking about the members of his household, not the physical house. And we probably have this hanging in our house. We do. And you might also. And it's not a bad thing to have in your house. It makes a proclamation to those who come in there. Verse 3. I will not look with approval on anything that is vile. I hate what faithless people do. I will have no part in it. The perverse of heart shall be far from me. I will have nothing to do with what is evil. Well, I wish he would have remembered these words when he got with Bathsheba, but I guess some years had passed. Now, today, with TV and the internet and movies, it's hard not to see things that are perverse or vile, especially when it comes to some of the TV shows and movies. They just about show everything. And porn sites, there's no telling what's out there on those. So it's best to use verse 3 as your guide on that. Do not look on approval with anything. I know that we would start watching a movie and we just had to stop because it was too bad. And it's hard to find a good one. He says in verse 5, whoever slanders their neighbor in secret, I will put to silence. Whoever has haughty eyes and a proud heart, I will not tolerate. And think about if somebody slandered you, especially in secret, then you cannot defend yourself. And you can actually kill somebody without killing them. You can destroy their integrity and their standing in the society, and you might even cause them to get fired, or you could even break up a marriage by slandering someone. This is kind of a form, I believe, of gossip. It may be true or it may not be true, but it's done in secret so the person cannot defend themselves. Well, what are these haughty eyes? I don't know if this fellow has haughty eyes or not. It means arrogance, an attitude of arrogance. And he kind of looks like he's about to be arrogant. So maybe that's a good picture of haughty eyes. Speaking of eyes, he says in verse 6, my eyes will be on the faithful in the land, that they may dwell in me, with me. The one whose walk is blameless will minister to me. Now, we have always stressed to our kids and grandkids about the importance of picking good friends. Usually hanging out with the wrong crowd will get them in trouble. And there are probably some people sitting in jail right now who didn't really do anything, but they were just with the wrong crowd and got caught up in it. So it's so important to pick good friends. And David wanted to do that. He wanted to hang out with good, decent folks who can give good advice and be a friend to him. Verse 7. No one who practices deceit will dwell in my house. No one who speaks falsely will stand in my presence. Well, David being king, he had the authority, I guess, to kick anybody out of the house he wanted to. It's kind of hard for us. If you tell some young folks today it's my way or the highway, they'll take the highway. And that's not good for them. But he wants a household of honesty and truthfulness. And verse 8. Every morning I will put to silence all the wicked in the land. I will cut off every evildoer from the city of the Lord. So this is David's way of proclaiming that he is going to rule justly. Now, we don't have any power to rule justly, but we just have to be careful of who our friends are. We cannot avoid the world since we live in it, but we don't have to approve of their ways either. So let's recap what this psalm says and see what ethical behavior looks like. The first thing he does, he said, I'm going to praise the Lord. He's going to sing to him, and he even wrote songs. And that's a good thing. Singing makes you feel good. He says, an ethical behavior person leads a blameless life. And while we know we can't be perfect, I used to think that when a person got saved that they're supposed to be perfect right off. But then I found out that there's this process that God puts you through called sanctification. And you're not going to start off exactly perfect, but you should be improving along the way. And if you have been a Christian for a long time and you are just the way you were back at the beginning, you might want to check yourself out. There should be an improvement in how we live. A ethical person sets a good example for their household. Our kids and grandkids are watching every move we make, and they will copy whatever we do, and we need to be good examples. Avoid evil. That's not easy living in the world. Have no part in unrighteousness. So you can be hanging around unrighteous people, and you might even end up doing some unrighteous things. And it's best to just avoid that. Stay away from that. We'll not listen to gossip, because people are being destroyed by that. We'll not tolerate pride. C.S. Lewis says pride is the biggest sin of all. And we don't know all that much about Satan, but he seemed to have been prideful, and which caused his fall. An ethical person hangs out with good people. It's hard to beat good, honest, righteous friends. An ethical person insists upon truth at home. Surely we can go to church and we can look like a wonderful, righteous person. And then when we go home, we turn into a different person, and that should not be. Even at work, sometimes you see people at work who you might have seen in church, and they don't seem very ethical at all. And an ethical person will silence the wicked. That's not easy, because you usually come out on the short end of the deal doing this, but it's still the best thing to do. Now, David had a son named Solomon who turned out to be pretty smart. In his Proverbs that he wrote, he explained prudent behavior was. He gave his readers 3 actions one should take to live an ethical life, and how great the world would be if more people practiced this. He said, in prudent behavior, doing what is right, just, and fair. And those are three things. This ought to be on our wall too. Do everything. If we could get in our minds and think every time what is right, just, and fair. I remember I had a boss one time, and every time we had a problem, he would always ask this question. He would say, "What is the right thing to do?" And that was a very good question. And we would always try to do the right thing, and we always tried to be just and fair at the place I worked. See, our ethics are on display, and the world is watching. Someone has said that our lives are the only Bible that the world will read, and we all need a revised version, and that's probably true. And here's a lady all dressed up like the Bible here. So let's leave remembering these 3 things. This should guide our dealings with other people: to do what is right, to do what is just, and to do what is fair. Because, see, we are children of God, and we represent the family of God to the world. So this Psalms 101 is a great place to start. But we can only be what we should be because of the work of Christ and the new birth. So thank you, and we'll see you again next week.